I'm going to do a quick overview of the 1967-68 Perfect Circle power unit. This is for cruise control. This is a Cadillac version. You can note it by the fact that the motor is in line. It's kind of unique to this model this year. On the outside, there's two screw-on fittings. These are for speedometer cables. One is input and one is output. It's inside there's a gear 1-to-1 ratio. This tube contains the port where you insert the cable. It's called a Bowden cable, and that goes back and forth when the dial moves. I'll have to do another video on the dial with the motor. On the back side, or the other side, towards the grill, the way this is mounted. So it would be mounted on the right fender wall, and this would be the front of the car, and this would be towards the firewall. You can test these units with the connector. I'll get into that later. But you can take the cover off to do an exam. The cover comes off with 3 screws on this version. So inside it can be a little daunting, but it's really fairly simple. Well, everything's simple once you get a handle on it. This here is the Centrifugal Fly Weights. They're used sort of like a steam engine to control the speed. As this thing spins, and it spins with the speed of the transmission, which represents ground speed, these weights move out. There's a lever arm inside. It moves this. That movement is counter to a coil spring. The coil spring tension is set by the Bowden cable at the end, and that pulls this in and out. As the flyweights move in and out, that moves this part. There's a pin that moves it, and it's got a set of points with a centerpiece. In this case, the centerpiece is powered. In some other units, the centerpiece is ground. The motor in this case is grounded, and then you can see there's a black wire and a red wire that go into the motor. The black wire and red wire are ultimately connected to these points. This is the magnetic assembly, and on the outside it would be connected to the lever that's connected to the linkages that control the carburetor. This part is loose and free to move until the magnet is energized, and then it locks in. This part here is actually a removable part with this capacitor. It has several connections, so front and back, and it also has the limit switches. Limit switches are hit by this arm, which is adjustable on the outside by this screw. Limit switches help prevent the system from being stuck at wide open throttle, and it disconnect the magnet when there's no power or the brake is applied. Disconnecting the magnet's really important, because then the throttle is no longer controlled by the movement of the magnet. You can't see it well in this image, but underneath there's a long screw. I'll show you the component, and the motor turns that screw back and forth. It's called the Bi-Directional Motor. Kind of quickly, this is the holding. This has several purposes actually, and it would be this way in the unit here. So it has a switch here. It's like a blade or reed switch that's pulled down by electromagnetic energy. I'll have to go do diagrams to show you the details, but This is the holding switch. It says primary function, and then underneath are the limit switches. Limit switches are hit by these tabs at the bottom, by the arm that's underneath. So that's that. Here's the centrifugal fly weights. They move in and out. There's lever arms underneath. As it moves the lever arms against the coil spring. Coil spring would ride on that. Drop the coil spring right on that arm, and then that's this coil spring here, and then that moves the points. Underneath, it moves the magnet back and forth by the bi-directional motor. Is this item? It would actually be this way. The motor, when it's properly installed, would connect with this by a gear, a set of gears. This gear goes on the end of the motor and engages with this gear. I'll have to talk about common failures later. And then the only other major part is the connector. It's a 4-wire connector, and it uses a momentary switch, and I'll get into details at another time. But that's the basically they're all similarly designed from the late 50s. I think the first one was 1958 in Chrysler Imperial, all the way to 1968, or maybe a little further in some units. It's basically this design. In the 70s, they switched to a transducer that controls vacuum pressure, and the vacuum pressure moves the throttle back and forth. In this case, it's the motor that moves it, so there's no vacuum required in this system. That's a wrap for this first video on the perfect circle cruise control. In some of the manuals called the power unit. This one here is in beautiful condition. It's been fully restored. Even the metal been fully restored. As you can see, it's really quite pretty. That's it for this one.